What's awesome about working in the game industry is that it's very technical for me. I get to work with other, I've always been a nerd my whole life. And so I have found this happy place where it's filled with nerds who are playing games, making games, and we like each other. Well, mostly. Sometimes we have some issues, but generally, yeah, right. Like that's something awesome. Like not everybody gets to do that. So my dad had to babysit me. He was working on weekends trying to get a computer system up, and it was a mini computer. And so he needed to babysit me over the weekend. So he gave me a programming book, 101 computer games in BASIC, and showed me how to just type it in, run it, and left me alone and was able to work for the next, the weekend and the future weekends. And it was super cool just to be able to even just get a machine to take two numbers and multiply together and have the results. And then you start adding more and more math to it. And you're like, wow, this is really cool. I like problem solving. I like playing with other programmers and artists. And so that works really well for me because the things that I enjoy about programming are the problem solving and the fact that, sometimes you get to figure things out by yourself. Sometimes you get to work with others to try to brainstorm and whatnot. And these days we have amazing amounts of information on the internet. So even if you're stuck or you're just kind of curious about something, or you want to go way deeper than you need to, you can. So for me, in my day-to-day, software engineering is building systems to solve problems. That's the fun part of the job. Sometimes it's a lot of debugging existing systems and modifying existing systems to either run on new platforms, try to get them to run faster because they've been scaled up to perhaps more than they were originally intended for. Generally programming is using the language and the tools you have available to accomplish some kind of a goal. Pretty much the normal flow is most teams use 1 to 3 week sort of sprints, and each day you will have a little quick meeting so that everybody can see what you're working on for that day. And these are generally informal, where you're basically like, I'm going to be working on this problem, and maybe this one if I get to that by the end of it, and you're listening in on everybody else's in case they're working on something that overlaps what you're working on, or you might be asked to help out with it, or you may need to code review that. And then for the most part, we're pretty free and left alone to do our thing. For engineering, it's really important to have a lot of free time, or not free time, time that's not spent in meetings or whatnot, because you need to get into the zone. You need to figure things out, research things. It's usually not something you've already done before. You almost always have to it's a little bit of a custom fine-tuning operation. So you are always trying to minimize the number of meetings and either, stack them all in the morning or stack them towards the end. And then, most of your time is spent in an editor or a debugger, unfortunately. Let's see. And sometimes you spend a lot of time waiting for, there's a joke about no, I'm busy compiling. And unfortunately, as you get closer to the end of the project, a lot of the things that you're trying to build or test, you can't really test outside of the final game running on the platform, in a fully deployed way. And you're like, yeah, that's 5 minutes every time I want to change something or worse. The biggest stresses are going to be that, you will try your best to give accurate estimates for things, because this is fundamentally still a business, and people have to try to get things done on time at the right quality level without error, and it's actually a really hard thing to do, and it's pretty stressful when you're you have a problem and you have no idea why it doesn't work yet, and you can stare at it and it turns out nobody else has any ideas either, but it's holding up the entire project. that's a bit stressful. The things that as a programmer you might get frustrated by are deadlines, right? Resources. Like you may have to try to make a game run on too small of a device. Frequent changes, right? Where you may be doing everything right, but design needs to change and iterate things, or information from a live service game comes in and tells you that this thing that you put a lot of work into, you did a great job on it, but we're not going to use it, right? So these kinds of things are going to happen. These are going to be the frustrations of working on any project, and so it's important not to, to kind of roll with that and recognize that, that's just the nature of working on software. To be a great programmer, you have to really enjoy programming, right? And those people are somewhat easy to spot. They're thinking about it, they're learning languages, they're trying out projects, they're playing games, they're even if it's not games, they're messing around with like 3D modeling software or 3D printers. It's pretty clear that you're passionate about it. And then if you're passionate about it, odds are you will be good at it. Maybe not great, but you will be good enough that you'll be able to figure out for yourself whether or not this is something you're really excited about or not. For a junior level or associate level programmer on our team, and we definitely want them to be good at computer science. We want them to be familiar with our games and company. And there's an expectation that you've probably done some of this for fun or, at another company. That is the challenge getting into the industry is, you see people saying like, how does somebody for a starting entry-level position have 15 years of experience? And it's like, I feel that is a problem. I don't know how we solve it, but I see that it is quite often where people are asking for entry-level programmers to have crazy amounts of expertise, and you're like, that's not going to happen. And yet there are people out there who are interested enough in your company and your game or your genre that they have, built that system or gave a talk at GDC or something along those, or just they're frequent contributors in a space where you can see them, right? And you're like, wow, this person really does know what they're doing and they would be a good fit. It's important to know a couple programming languages, one that should be C and C-like, because that is kind of, a systems level language, right? Where you're actually, you do know what a pointer is and how memory works, and you're thinking about things like DMA and interrupts and whatnot. Even if you never write one of them, you have to kind of be aware, how does moving the mouse cause the cursor on screen to actually move, right? And it can be an abstract level of knowledge of that, but I think you want to know that. You want to know then, a high level, high productivity language, maybe domain specific, maybe general, but something just that you can, whip out code and like try experiments and whatnot. I would probably start with pulling down something like Unity or Unreal and start just working through their samples. These are commercial quality game engines that you can download, and there are a lot of people using them, lots of examples. I think that's probably where I would start if I was starting from scratch. And there's finished samples that you can just jump in and start running on your PC or Mac. So they're often cross-platform, so you're not stuck with like, great, I have exactly the wrong kind of computer. It's like, it'll be fine. Whatever you have, as long as it's a reasonably modern computer, you'll be able to try these things out. There's maybe an argument to be made for modding something or using like a Roblox or various game editors to mod games, and I think that's probably fine. I'm not much of a modder, but I think that that's a totally legitimate way to get started. I know a fair number of people who started that way as well. It is really competitive right now, and we've been seeing a lot of layoffs in this last year as the industry has maybe overexpanded. I don't really have a great answer for how you get into the industry. It may be that games are so complicated now that it's actually, there are very few truly entry-level positions, and you have to either finish school with a extensive game development portfolio of your own so that you come in as a mid-level person, or you go to some other industry where it's easier to get into as an entry level or straight out of college and level up there and then make the move over to games. Certainly we've had a fair number of engineers start in the non-gaming part of the code, right? There's a lot of tooling and supports and recording metrics and that sort of a space. And that seems to work well for people to do an internship. So they will do an internship, maybe they'll work with the business development folks or analytics folks, and they may not ever touch any game code, but they'll be seeing the kinds of things that game developers are doing. And then when they apply, they'll be able to come back as a associate level programmer on a game team. And in those cases, a lot of times it'll be things like tooling and build systems. You might be really good at gameplay and game design, so you might jump straight onto the game as well. There's there's a lot of scripting and whatnot, so there can be a lot of turning what the designers are trying to accomplish into code, into the proprietary engine, although less proprietary engines these days, but still there is a translation layer that goes from like what the game designers want to do and getting the game engine to do it. And so that's usually a pretty good starting place. Sometimes if you have specific knowledge, like if you had worked at another company, for example, if you'd interned at a Facebook or a Google or whatnot and knew something, gotten a chance to learn a lot about servers or, massively distributed systems and whatnot, that kind of knowledge can turn out to be helpful in games on the gameplay server teams, as well as matchmaking and lobbies and, chat and all sorts of other things like that. So if you want to get into games, sometimes the right answer is go somewhere else first and pick up something that will be necessary in games. The best thing about programming is that it's taking a small set of rules and solving big problems with it. If you study computer science, I think there will be, plenty of opportunities for you. May not be always exactly where you thought they were going to be, but that's okay. Just like having a strong math and science background, and engineering and, finance, there's usually jobs out there that are interesting, but they may not be immediately obvious to you that they were even out there.